everybody, it's Ellie here with WhoCulture. Just going to address the croaky elephant in the room. I am just getting over a pretty bad cold, so I apologise that I sound a little bit weird, but we're just going to roll with it because I want to talk to you about the Easter eggs for Wild Blue Yonder. As you all know, I wasn't actually around to watch Wild Blue Yonder when it actually aired, so make sure that you do check out Sean's Ups and Downs if you haven't seen that. And if you want to know my thoughts on the episode beyond what I'm going to talk about here today, if you check out Monday's discussion video, I give a little bit of insight into what I thought personally of the episode as well. But for now, let's get straight into the Easter eggs for Wild Blue Yonder. Number 1. So we open this episode in England 1666, and this isn't actually the first time that the Doctor has visited 1666, because in the 5th Doctor serial, The Visitation, he lands in 1666 and accidentally starts the Great Fire of London. And so when 14 warns Isaac Newton to stay away from London, it is in fact because he knows that he accidentally started the Great Fire. So it was just kind of a nod there to his past mistakes and warning Isaac Newton to steer clear of that situation. Number 2, and following on from that, still in relation to Isaac Newton, it was revealed by the director Tom Kingsley that the house that they used for Sir Isaac Newton's house was actually the real Isaac Newton's house in Lincolnshire, and this was the very last thing that they shot for this episode. Number 3, and again on the topic of Isaac Newton, the character is played by Nathaniel Curtis, who, like Ruth Madeley, had appeared previously in Russell T Davies's Years and Years. Nathaniel Curtis appeared in Russell T Davies's It's a Sin. But even more important than that, here's a little story time for you. I've actually met Nathaniel Curtis. I wouldn't go as far as to say that we're best friends and that he would recognise me in the street, but before he had his big break in things such as It's a Sin, he performed in a touring Shakespeare company that performed in pubs, in pub gardens across the country. And I used to work in a pub, and he was one of the cast members, and he was very, very lovely, and it's so lovely to see him progressing and having his big break and moving on to things such as Doctor Who, and I'm able to watch a scene such as this and go, oh wait, hang on a second, I know that guy. Number 4, and Isaac Newton has a maid, a servant, a cleaner who is named Mrs. Merridew. This could just be a random name that RTD decided upon in the script, or it could be a direct reference to the character of the same name in The Moonstone, an 1868 novel by Wilkie Collins, and it's a really early example of kind of a modern detective fiction, so there could be some parallels drawn obviously between detective fiction and the mystery of this episode and the Doctor in general. Or it could just be completely random and we've just drawn a conclusion out of nothing. Number 5, of course this one wasn't going to get past me. The Doctor reveals something he shouldn't have and he says the word spoilers. Now, it goes without saying that of course I was going to notice that one. It doesn't really need much explaining. Of course, it's River Song's catchphrase. It's a word that she uses all the time when she's revealing things to the Doctor or not revealing them to him. And I just love that. Especially because it's 14 and we have now those previous experiences of 11 and 12 with River, that this is a word that sticks in his vocabulary and a word that he uses now. Number 6. Okay, so this one was also the case last week, but we didn't notice it then and we've got more information since. So, the opening title sequence. Has anybody else noticed that the TARDIS kind of lets off these sparks as it comes into contact with the time vortex itself? Well, in the edition of SFX magazine that was released on the 1st of December, Russell T Davies actually said that that was very intentional and it's something that's actually going to become very important later on in future episodes. So, I guess speculate away. Start thinking now what it means that the TARDIS is sparking when it hits the time vortex. Number 7. So obviously the episode is called Wild Blue Yonder and the TARDIS plays the song Wild Blue Yonder when it lands on this space station. That is the official song of the United States Air Force, and there's a kind of a few levels as to why this is relevant and important to the story. Obviously it's a war song, so in itself it's a warning of the danger that is present in this episode and that's on the ship. But also the kind of the term Wild Blue Yonder refers to something that's far off in the distance and a long way away, which again is relevant to the fact that this episode is set on the edge of creation. You cannot be any further away, so the kind of the wild blue yonder, the in the distance, the far away, so that's relevant too. And also it ties into the fact that Wilf is a military man, Bernard Cribbins was a military man, and that in itself just feels like a little bit of a nod and a tribute to Wilf and Bernard Cribbins as well. Number 8, so when the TARDIS crashes and the Doctor and Donna are outside of it, there is a big stream of fire that explodes out of the TARDIS doors, which looks really, really cool. But it's quite reminiscent of a moment that happens in the Halloween Apocalypse, which was the first episode of the Flux story. The Doctor kind of hammers the TARDIS console and unleashes a beam of the time vortex energy and fires it straight into the Flux, kind of in an attempt to stop it, which doesn't work. But it is very reminiscent, and obviously Flux is relevant and mentioned later on in the story, so it feels like this is kind of a very similar effect and a little nod to Flux as a story. Number 9. So now that they're on the ship, you notice that there are these kind of strange hieroglyphs and symbols on the walls. First we see them on the walls above the doorways in that room that the Doctor and Donna crash land in, but actually we see them throughout the ship and in other places too. The look of this language was very deliberate, and it was revealed in the episode of Unleashed, I believe, that it was designed in this way because obviously the captain of the ship is horse-like, and so all of the symbols and language are designed to look as if they can be created by the movements of a horse's hoof, so they can be scratched into the floor or scratched into other elements to kind of be developed into a form of language. And that's probably also why all the buttons have this kind of round design to them, that they look easy to hit with a hoof. And I just love that attention to detail. The captain is only in it very, very briefly, and while relevant to the story, they could very easily have not really thought about that. And there is so much attention to detail in every element of the design for this episode. Number 10. So the Doctor pulls out his non-sonic screwdriver, which feels like a nod to Jackson Lake, who obviously thought he was the Doctor but wasn't, and he did the very same thing using a normal ordinary screwdriver and referring to it as his sonic screwdriver. So that was a nice little nod there. Number 11. So obviously the TARDIS runs away, and Donna says to the Doctor, you can whistle, you can snap your fingers, you can summon it. And obviously this is referring to previous times that we've seen the Doctor summon the TARDIS in different ways. So obviously the first time that we saw him snap his fingers to open the TARDIS doors was in the Series 4 episode Forest of the Dead, which is also where we first meet River, the best character. And also then we did see him do that later on in the story. We had multiple 11th Doctor moments where he also did that to open the TARDIS doors. And in the Return of Dr. Mysterio, the 12th Doctor whistles for the TARDIS and it materializes around him there as well. So perhaps Donna maybe subconsciously picked up some of those memories of the times that the Doctor had done that in those 15 years between the last time she saw him, or the last time she was the Dr. Donna, and when the Dr. Donna was reawakened inside of her. Obviously, we kind of learn or are led to believe at the end of the episode that she doesn't have those memories, and that the double had those memories because she was actually reading the Doctor. So it remains to be seen, but I guess there's up for a debate. Do you think Donna actually does remember those 15 years and she said she didn't, or does she actually know what happened to the Doctor in those 15 years? Number 12. So obviously the HADS system is what made the TARDIS disappear. The Hostile Action Displacement System. So this was first mentioned in the second Doctor serial, The Crotons. Basically means if the TARDIS senses danger, it runs away. And then it kind of vanished from the show until the 11th Doctor episode, Cold War. And then it was also featured in the Series 9 premiere, but it was actually referred to as a dispersal system as opposed to a displacement system. But I think it probably was meant to be the same thing. They just reworded it slightly. Number 13. So Donna refers to the head of her school choir, that's Mrs. Bean. Now this could be a nod to Mr. Bean, because let's not forget that Rowan Atkinson did actually play a version of the Doctor in a, I believe it was a comic relief sketch. So do we accept that as canon? I'll let you decide, but it could be a little nod to Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson as the Doctor there. Or it could just be a funny name. Number 14. So Donna dubs the robot Jimbo, which is a name that actually appears quite a few times in Russell T Davies's Doctor Who. So in The End of the World, which was his very second episode, the first time he was showrunner, and this is his second episode, his second time as showrunner, so that's interesting. The 9th Doctor refers to one of the kind of spider droids as Jimbo. Jimbo is also the name of one of the workers at Adipose Industries, who apparently keeps the printer well stocked. And finally, Jackie Tyler mentions someone called Jimbo in the kind of farewell tour moments of The End of Time Part 2, who was supposed to be giving Rose and her a lift, but his car broke down, and that is why they ended up walking in the snow, where Rose then bumps into the Doctor and thinks that he's drunk. So basically, Jimbo, you're a bit useless. I tell you what else is a bit weird is my brother's name is Jimmy, and Jimbo has been his nickname ever since we were a child. I mean, maybe not so much now he's an adult, but Jimbo is what he was always called as a child. So every time I hear that word, it just makes me think of my brother, who is not a robot or a useless person who can't give a lift or a worker at Adipose Industries. Number 15, when the Doctor reveals the little car in the floor. First of all, how did he know there was a car in the floor? He just has like super car sensors or something. But he goes, "Your car, m'lady," and she goes, "Thank you, Parker." This is a reference to Thunderbirds. Parker is Lady Penelope's driver, chauffeur, and a lot of people did notice this reference, and it was just quite funny, and a little nod to Thunderbirds, because why not? Number 16, we're going to head back to Jimbo just for a second. We've been saying this ever since we saw him in the poster for the episode, that he very much looks like Marvin the paranoid android from the 2005 movie version of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That particular universe, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, was created by Douglas Adams, and he was actually a script editor on Doctor Who in the 70s, and he also wrote for the show, including episodes such as City of Death. So Jimbo could actually, or the design of Jimbo could actually be a little intentional homage to Douglas Adams there. Number 17, so when they're looking out into the darkness, Donna questions, "Where are the stars?" Now, I don't know about anybody else, but I immediately thought of Turn Left, where Wilf was looking up at the stars, and he's like, "Oh my God, Donna, the stars are going out." And that's a really relevant plot point of that entire episode, that the stars are going out, and it means something terrible is about to happen. And so even though it wasn't necessarily meaning that, I instantly thought of that, and it felt like a little nod to the relevance of stars and the lack of stars in that episode, and also the relevance of it here as well. Number 18, so obviously the Doctor says that they're at the edge of creation, the edge of the universe, and this isn't the first time that this concept has kind of been explored in Doctor Who. So obviously in the 11th Doctor's episode, The Doctor's Wife, they kind of go to a bubble universe that's outside of the main universe. And in Flux, the 13th Doctor travels to the Division HQ, which is kind of straddling the universes 1 and 2. And in Planet of Evil, the 4th Doctor travels to Zeta Minor, which is right on the edge of the known universe. Russell T Davies did reveal on Instagram in a post that he did actually cut some lines from the script where the Doctor mentioned going to these places before. But as I said, it was ultimately cut from the script, but the Doctor was thinking it, because I know a lot of people pointed out that the Doctor suggested that this is, he'd never been here before, and a lot of people said, well, there was this moment and this moment and this moment, and Russell T Davies then addressed that, saying that he did intend to have that, but he cut those lines from the script ultimately. Number 19, so speaking of the edge of the universe, the Doctor also travels there in another 4th Doctor serial called Underworld, and this is basically an infamous story where Tom Baker and Leela Jameson, they basically spend the entire time walking around in front of a green screen. And actually, on this week's edition of the official Doctor Who podcast, Russell T Davies said that he actually based Wild Blue Yonder on Underworld, and he said special effects corridors all the way through, corridors that the cast aren't really in, just like they did all those years ago. Considering that Underworld is regularly voted as one of the worst stories in the show's history, I would say that that was quite a bold decision and bold choice of Russell T Davies. So well done, I guess, because this could have failed massively if that was your source material. Number 20. Now, I made quite a lot of mentions last week of Marvel references in the Star Beast, and they haven't stopped coming. There was a shot where the Doctor and Donna are staring into the nothingness of space, into the darkness, and it looks very, very similar to a shot in the opening of Avengers Endgame where Tony Stark is looking out into space, and they're very, very similar. Whether it was intentional or not, I have no idea. Number 21. So obviously we meet the doppelgangers of the Doctor and Donna, but this, let's not forget, this is not the first time that David Tennant has acted opposite another version of his Doctor, because obviously we had the Meta-Crisis Doctor in Journey's End. Number 22, and obviously speaking of doppelgangers, director Tom Kingsley compared this episode to The Thing, which is obviously about a shape-shifting monster that infiltrates the Antarctic base. Antarctica, a place where it's icy and cold and snowy. And obviously there's a lot of paranoia in that episode, so we couldn't not mention that. Number 23. So there are a lot of parallels between this episode and another Russell T Davies episode, which is Midnight. Midnight, there's an entity that kind of copies a person by stealing their voice, and in this episode, the creature copies a person by stealing their form. Now, we did mention this in the ups and downs, but do we think that these entities are related in some way? Are these species related in some way? Is one just a more evolved and advanced version of the other? It's something that's worth thinking about. This is Russell T Davies. I feel like it's something that he may well have thought about. He clearly just has a thing for aliens stealing your identity and personality. Number 24. And there are other things that very much made me think of previous episodes as well. I think I mentioned this in Monday's discussion, but the kind of distorted faces of the Doctor and Donna doppelgangers reminded me of Miss Evangelista. I also got images of the Rebel Flesh and the Almost People and those doppelgangers because, I mean, they literally were gangers. They could distort and manipulate their bodies in certain ways. The pile of bodies was very reminiscent of the pile of ganger bodies, and then the big bodies all squished together in the corridor. So I do think there were parallels to previous episodes in that form as well. Number 25. As I mentioned, Marvel references. Donna explicitly mentions the Venom films and how they were talking about where the extra mass comes from, and that's something that her husband Sean always says when he watches the Venom films. It's not particularly something that I've ever thought about when I've watched a film like that, but maybe Sean is a very clever guy. You know, they say that taxi drivers, London cab drivers, have like really big brains and are really clever because they have to remember all the routes in London. Is it called The Knowledge? Is that what it's called? I think that's what it's called. So yeah, I think Sean's just a really clever guy who thinks about these things. Number 26. So there's a quick parallel here between the two versions of Donna. I'm going to refer to them as the ganger version. That's what happens in the Rebel Flesh. Anyway, now when the Doctor and Donna first get separated, Donna slides down into the tunnels. And then when we just skip all the way to the end of the episode, the fake Donna gets sent down a slide out of the TARDIS. So apparently slides are a thing now in Doctor Who. I'm here for it. I do love a good slide, and there was a nice parallel between both versions of Donna being kind of shot down a slide. Number 27. So Russell T Davies seems to have a thing for mentioning Southampton in the early stages of his eras. Here, Donna tells the story of how she was born in Southampton, and in the first episode of his first tenure, Rose, in 2005, Clive shows Rose a picture of the Daniels family from Southampton and friend, and of course that friend resembled the Ninth Doctor, and they were obviously in Southampton about to board the Titanic. Number 28. The fake version of Donna talks to the real Doctor and brings up the Timeless Child and the Flux. By talking to the Doctor about the fact that he's not actually from Gallifrey, we're referring to the fact that in the Timeless Child, the Doctor found out that they are not in fact from Gallifrey and they don't know where they're from. In terms of the Flux, obviously that featured in a whole series of the 13th Doctor's story, and it was this basically all-consuming force that destroyed everything in its path and kind of was created specifically to destroy the Doctor. And that's why the 14th Doctor feels so guilty about it, because it was created with the sole purpose of destroying them. Also, at the end of Flux, it wasn't really clear whether the universe was largely destroyed or whether it wasn't. But now we have confirmation that that did in fact happen. And this scene also addresses kind of the emotional scars that the Doctor feels as a result of the Flux. Way more than anything we ever saw in relation to the 13th Doctor's reaction to the events. It really showed the development of the character in the aftermath of that situation. Number 29. So Donna mentions her auntie Iris when she's telling the story about when she was born in Southampton. This is likely a reference to the character of Iris Wildthyme, who is one of the most popular long-running characters in the Doctor Who expanded media. And actually, Iris has been voiced by none other than Katie Manning on quite a few occasions. So that was a nice little reference to the expanded Doctor Who media. Number 30. Of course, the Doctor doing that kind of creepy crab walk has to be a reference to The Exorcist, and considering the mention of other horror films from Tom Kingsley, the director, it's not too hard to assume that this is another nod to a classic horror film. Also, it was creepy as hell. Number 31. Did anyone else see the Spider-Man meme when they saw this moment? Yeah, me too. Number 32. Now, the fact that the Doctor pulls out a salt shaker from his jacket could mean nothing, but it also could be a connection to the unicorn and the wasp, where obviously he's poisoned and he's like, salt, salt, I need salt. So now he just carries salt with him just in case he gets poisoned. Although, when Donna brings over a bag of salt, he says, no, that's too salty. So maybe he shouldn't have salt with him because that's too salty to actually help the situation. So I see a flaw in your logic there, Doctor. Number 33. So the fake doctor, he says that he wants to travel to the Doctor's universe to play your vicious games and win. This very much feels like a bit of foreshadowing of the toy maker, who will be appearing obviously in next week's episode, who obviously plays cruel games, as we know from his first original story. Is this Russell kind of hinting at what's to come in the following episode, a bit of foreshadowing for the toy maker? I mean, it could be nothing, but it does feel like a little bit of a, ooh. Number 34. Okay, we cannot be the only people that thought of this, but when the Doctor and Donna are backed up against a wall as the evil Doctor and Donna are approaching them, and it spins around, and then suddenly they look like they're safe from the danger, and then it spins them back around into the danger. Did anybody else think of that really brilliant scene in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where Indy and his dad are caught by the Nazis, and then they're stuck in a fire, and then they back into a fireplace, and it turns around and it's like a secret door, and then they end up inside like a Nazi operations room, and they end up in more danger. And that is what that whole scene just made me think of, and it very much made me smile. Number 35. So rest in peace, Captain McHorseface. This species is completely new to Doctor Who. Really impressive. I really like the design of this horse-like species, and Russell T Davies said that he kind of did that on purpose. You know, he didn't give them a name, and he kind of wants fans to come up with a name, and then if he sees one he likes, then maybe he'll coin it, maybe he'll take it and he'll use it. So let's hit the comments down below and start thinking of a name for this species and see if we can make it canon. Number 36. So obviously when the Doctor does return Donna back to London, he's a day or two late on his arrival, and this is not the first time that we've seen this happen in Doctor Who, of course. When he brought Rose home for the first time in Aliens of London, he was a year late, so that didn't go down too well. And then obviously when he returns for Amy, he said he'd be 5 minutes, and he was actually 12 years, so not so great at the older timekeeping. For a Time Lord, not so great at the timekeeping. And number 37, of course, Wilfred Mott, Bernard Cribbins. This is the first time that we've seen Bernard Cribbins back in the role of Wilfred Mott since New Year's Day 2010, which was obviously The End of Time Part 2, where he was kind of the companion to that two-parter, and we saw him obviously in that final farewell tour at Donna's wedding to Sean. He's so happy to see Ten's face again, and obviously when you realise that he essentially killed Ten. You know, he's the reason that Ten regenerated, so you just feel all those emotions when you see his face, and it's really, really beautiful and sad. And obviously, as we mentioned again on Monday, this was the only scene that Bernard Cribbins was able to film for the 60th anniversary, which is beautiful and a lovely way to say farewell to a lovely, lovely man, but also very, very heartbreaking as well. We love you, Bernard Cribbins. And he is now in the wild Blue Yonder. So I've just got a couple of quick fire ones that I'm going to mention just here off the bat. The Doctor pretending to be poisoned was actually pretty mean, considering that Donna actually did witness him being poisoned in The Unicorn and the Wasp. So funny, not funny. Not really an Easter egg, but everyone in our group chat has been very much enjoying the meme of the Doctor with his two fingers stuck up, so that's funny. We did wonder if this whole episode was kind of Russell T Davies taking a bit of a shot at AI, creatures that are morphing and changing, like an AI program that's kind of generating some new version of art. It's kind of soulless and missing something and it's not quite real. Now obviously this was written a while ago, but AI is such a hot topic in Hollywood right now, and most people are against it, especially kind of producers and writers and artists. And we know that Russell T Davies is very much a man of the people, so to speak, so it wouldn't be a bit surprising if this was him taking a shot at AI. The teeth in Evil Donna and Evil Doctor very much reminded reminded me first of Prisoner Zero teeth that we see, and it also reminded me of the teeth of the vampires in Vampires of Venice. Something else I noticed, is it important, I don't know, let's discuss, is it important that this is now the third time that we've seen the Doctor and or Donna trapped either side of a glass door? I mean, obviously the first time we saw it was when Wilf and the Doctor were trapped on either side of that radiation chamber. In the Star Beast, we had the Doctor and Donna trapped on either side, and it forced the Doctor Donna to be reawakened. And here we have real Doctor and Donna on one side and fake Doctor and Donna on the other side of this glass partition. When Donna asks the Doctor what he's been up to in the last 15 years, he says, robots, chases, waterfalls, the usual, or something along those lines. The only episode that we could think of that happened after the Doctor and Donna departed in those last 15 years was The Girl Who Waited, and obviously there were handbots, robots, it was the Red Waterfall, and there were a lot of chases. And actually the decision where here the Doctor has to choose between the two Donnas is kind of quite similar and reminiscent of that episode where the Doctor has to choose between the two versions of Amy. This could be a very clever nod to a very specific episode, or we could just be looking very deeply into something that means nothing. So there you have it, there's all our Easter eggs from this episode. I don't doubt that we missed some. Let us know if you noticed some that you haven't seen us mention here in this video in the comments down below. In the meantime, I've been Ellie with WhoCulture, and in the words of Riversong herself, goodbye, sweeties.